He's retiring from NBC News after 45 years. We'll look at his remarkable career. And in our Meet the Press Minute, Fidel Castro comes to America. When he was here back in 1959, he had lots to say on Meet the Press. And joining me in the questioning this morning is Lisa Myers of NBC News. And gentlemen, we welcome you all.
Thank you.
Senator Domenici, you're out there in New Mexico. Let me start with you.
God's country, God's country.
Again, God bless you.
Thank you.
You have a new budget put together. The interesting thing about it, despite it being described as revolutionary by some, is that over 7 years, spending goes up 22%, and the federal debt goes to $6 trillion. How do you tell the American people that's such a radical document?
Well, frankly, I never said it was radical. What I said was that we were going to get to balance and that we were going to be fair in doing it, and that the government was still going to spend more money after we finished, but we would control the entitlement programs, which were growing so fast. We'll control them, and that means after 2002, we'll stop borrowing money. We'll have to pay that big debt that's accrued, but we'll stop borrowing money, and that means a better life for everyone. There's nothing more important to our future than this. It's an outstanding document, and we anxiously await the president sending us something that is real. You know, he's had 2 votes in the Senate. One is first budget, one is second. Neither time did he get any votes, 0 votes. So we anxiously await the president coming forth with something real that will get real support.
Senator Domenici, one of your fellow Republicans, Senator Cohen of Maine, said, we have this $6 trillion debt looming.
Yes.
Why would we be cutting taxes when we have this huge debt? He said it's like putting your brake on the gas pedal and on the brake at the same time. Why are you cutting taxes $245 billion when we have this debt?
First of all, after all the sound and fury, this tax cut, 90% of it will go to American taxpayers who earn $100,000 and less. So for those who keep talking about the rich, about $22 billion of this will go to Americans who earn over $100,000, about $22 billion. Remember, their taxes were raised in the president's budget by $270 billion, that same group. Now, why did we do this? Because we feel once you get a balanced budget, there is a dividend, an economic dividend, a big plus that comes from it. We thought you ought to give that back to the American people, the hardworking people in the country, let them spend it. Don't pump it right back in the budget and start spending again. It's that simple. Balance first, then give the American taxpayers, including 90% of this, to middle-income Americans because they are entitled to it.
And you wouldn't use that money to work down the debt, apply against the deficit? Why not?
Look, for the first time, we're going to have this surplus. That's what I call the economic dividend. And frankly, I believe when we have come this far and we know that the American taxpayer, in particular those with children, are overburdened and have a difficult time making it, we say let's give them back some of this economic bonus that we just received. I think it's a pretty good package on the tax side, and frankly, I am very confident that if the economy continues to grow after this package is in place, and I think it will, I think interest rates are going to come down, then I believe we're going to have a balanced budget and still cut taxes for the American people.
You know, Senator, there was a lot of speculation and, in fact, boasting that government would be cut rather dramatically, that 3 cabinet departments would be eliminated, including the Department of Energy. But
Yes.
Many say that you blocked cutting the Department of Energy because enormous pork goes to New Mexico through that department.
Well, look, if the 2 greatest national laboratories in the world that kept us out of a nuclear war are pork, then I lay full credit for them. 2 of them are in New Mexico. But to tell you the truth, getting rid of the Department of Energy will not get rid of the expenditures that the department must make for nuclear deterrent activities. A huge portion of it is defense spending. Some of that's in my state, but it's all over the country. That's the most important defense dollar you can spend. It keeps the Russians, their nuclear weapons, in fact.
Senator, thank you. Let me get everybody else involved. Senator Dodd. Senator Domenici just said if the president gets real. The Democrats, we know, are against the Republican plan, but you have put forward nothing but the status quo.
Well, that's completely untrue. In fact, the economy has grown in the last quarter 4.2%. We cut $500 billion out of the deficit without a single Republican vote in the last Congress. Clearly on the right track. Mortgage rates are down at a 20-month low. We're clearly moving in the right direction. Deficit reduction has occurred 3 years in a row, the first time since Harry Truman served as president. The size of government is coming down. This budget that was presented to us, this 2,000-page document, without a single hearing in the Senate of the United States, after we've had 24 days of hearings, by the way, on Whitewater, and 11 on Waco, and 10 on Ruby Ridge, not a single day of hearings on this document. It is the single largest transfer of wealth in the history of the country that goes after children, the elderly, education. At a time we ought to be investing in the country, we're taking the opposite, going the opposite direction. The president has proposed ideas, has offered to have the Republicans come forward. They have refused to do so up till now. Let them get through with their budget process. There will be negotiations, I hope, and we'll resolve this, but not on the basis of what's in this package.
Senator Nichols, President Clinton said yesterday that unless you back off cuts on education and Medicare and the environment, he won't even begin talking.
Well, Tim, it's unfortunate because, you know, one day the president kind of sends feelers like, yes, he's willing to negotiate, and then the next day either he or his press secretary, somebody slam dunking the process. He's going to have to get at the table. He's not at the table now. He needs to participate. Frankly, a lot of us want to see a budget enacted. We want to make this thing happen. We want to make it real. We want to really balance the budget. Irving R. Levine has been on the program for 45 years. I think you've seen one balanced budget in his term. I'd like to have that become a reality in 7 years. For that to happen, the president's going to have to participate with us, not just stand back and throw rocks.
But if the Republicans insist it's their budget or nothing, and the president says, I won't talk unless you begin the compromise, in a few weeks, the government will run out of money and default on its debt.
Well, default's not in anybody's interest. That's not in Congress' interest, not in the president's interest. It's not in the interest of the United States. We shouldn't allow that to happen. But to avoid that, the president's going to have to participate. He needs to get on the phone. He needs to call Bob Dole and Newt Gingrich and say, hey, let's see what kind of differences there are. A lot of people say, oh, these are humongous differences. And I disagree. I look at the Medicare. It's probably the biggest, most contentious issue we've had. Republicans say that Medicare should grow about 7% per year. The president's budget in June uses different economic assumptions, but he says it should grow at 7.5% per year. Surely we can figure out a way to save Medicare. We should. You either save it by increasing payroll taxes or reducing the growth. There's not that much difference in growth projections. We should work together in bipartisan fashion to make sure that we save Medicare and to pass a budget that will lead us to a balanced budget no later than 7 years.
Will you and the Republicans vote to increase the debt ceiling so that the government continue to borrow money and pay its debts while the negotiations go on?
If we have serious negotiations going on that look like we're going to lead to a real solution, we might give a temporary debt extension. But we're not going to give the president a long-term debt extension just to continue deficits, because Chris mentioned deficits gone down for the last 3 years. That's correct. What he didn't say is for the next 10 years, they're expected to go up and stay over $200 billion. President Clinton is offering nothing to help reverse that. We want to have it balanced no later than 7 years. If the president will work with that, we might give a temporary debt extension, so we'll pass a permanent measure that will really lead to a balanced budget.
Senator Kerry, what should President Clinton do now?
Well, I think he needs to tell us where we want to go, and you know, balancing the budget ought to be just one of our objectives. I mean, one of the biggest weaknesses of this proposal, in addition to the tax cut, which actually increases the deficit next year and the year after, in the next 2 years, our deficit goes up as a consequence of this tax cut. In addition to that, one of the biggest problems frankly, with the Republican budget is it does not control the cost of entitlements. It grows from 64% of the budget to 74% of the budget, another 10 points out of domestic programs that will enable us to invest in education, invest in training, those things that will enable us to raise our standard of living. It'll take us away from the goal of universal health insurance. We've got to have a safety net of universal health insurance in an environment where businesses are being more competitive and laying people off. It seems to me that that ought to be one of the goals that we have on our table.
Should President Clinton veto the Republican bill as it now constructed?
I think he should veto the Republican bill as it now stands, but I think we need to come back and say, in addition to balancing the budget, here are some other goals that we have, and engage Democrats like myself who are willing to cast tough votes on entitlements, which, and frankly, we did not do. I didn't see us casting nearly as difficult a vote, particularly in the long term. You know, when I retire in the year 2008, when that baby boom generation starts to retire, that's when the real problems occur. And it seems to me that if you're looking at the future, the president's the only person that represents the whole country. As you look at the future, you've got to tackle that cost of entitlements because it's eroding our ability to invest, as I said, in those things that enable working people to capture a larger share and have larger and higher incomes.
Does the President Clinton, have the political will, the political courage to stay the course and negotiate down with Republicans? Do the Democrats have confidence in his ability to stand by them?
I think so. But again, what matters here is defining the goal. Where are we going? It seems to me is important. I mean, we got a report this week that indicates that the HHS maybe were silent during the welfare debate. A very important report that indicates that we may have another million people in poverty, million children in poverty as a consequence of the welfare reform proposal. The goal of the federal government ought to be to try to the extent possible, to keep the United States economy growing, to try to narrow the earnings gap, if possible, between the economic haves and the economic have-nots, to give every American a chance to move up the economic ladder rather than merely protecting those who are at the top of the ladder. And it seems to me that the President of the United States needs to define those goals for the American people and tell us, you know, what constructive role can the federal government have in reaching those objectives.
Lisa?
Senator Domenici, let's assume that we can get by the rhetoric and there is an attempt to reach a compromise with the president. Does any compromise with the president have to achieve a balanced budget within 7 years? Is that non-negotiable?
I think we should be to a balance in the year 2002. Frankly, as I look at things and as I look at what's being said by people like Senator Kerry, who's on this program, as I look at 19 Democrats who proposed a balanced budget and actually suggested that we take $195 billion out of Medicare instead of 270, also suggested that Medicaid have a rather substantial reduction in its growth. Listening to Bob Kerry, who's saying maybe we should spend a little more in education and other things, but we still have to get the balance. Look, if the president's serious, incidentally, the 19 Democrats also proposed that the consumer price index be looked at for its realism. The president can look at that too and bring something to the table. 7 years ought to be the goal. Frankly, if the president will get off this issue of we're trying to blackmail him and understand that he has produced nothing. I mean, he did a second budget to match ours, which turns out to have zero support by his own Democrats. So if he'll get off that and look at this whole football field, he can come up with some things we can work with. But he can't do it if he sits back and insists that we give him a debt extension so we can just sit around and once again not solve this problem.
What about $245 billion in tax cuts? Does any compromise have to have that final figure in the way of tax cuts?
Look, Lisa, I think I'm suggesting that there are many things the president could bring to the table. Let me repeat, he has brought literally nothing of any significance to the table. And in fact, he changes his mind regularly. So, you know, what I'm saying to the president, come to the table, bring something to the table that's real, that shows a balanced budget in 7 years, and you might be surprised, we'll get a budget.
So $245 billion in tax cuts is negotiable.
Look, I didn't say anything was negotiable. What I said is that there are a lot of ways to get there, and he ought to start bringing us some that are his, rather than just sitting back and saying, give me another year, give me an extension of the debt limit. Look, we worked too hard to get here, and it's not this radical, drastic budget. On this program, we got two Democrat senators saying almost opposite things. One is saying you should restrain the entitlements more than you did. That's Senator Kerry. You've got the other senator saying, my good friend from Connecticut, saying we ought to spend more money.
No, I didn't.
Now, frankly, we ought to be able to fix this some way.
I didn't say that. I
Senator-
was one of the 19 that voted the other day on that issue, Steve. Look at the voting record.
Mr. Chairman, one last thing in this area. The American people remain profoundly skeptical that any plan to balance the budget will actually achieve balance. And after all, the magic asterisks and rosy scenarios is to blame them. Do you promise that any compromise will stick with the assumptions of the Congressional Budget Office and you will not cook the numbers?
You know, I want to promise the American people that, first let me give a little background. I've worked on this 20 years. I've put a lot of budgets together. I have never seen one that is more real than this one. The economics are conservative. The president would like us to be more liberal with them. We've been burned by liberal economics, sometimes called smoke and mirrors. I'm not going to be part of a settlement of this confrontation between the president and the Congress with anything that has the slightest tinge of smoke and mirrors in it. We're going to be real.
So you will stick with the assumptions of the Congressional Budget Office, period.
We're going to make sure that we have an absolute real budget that we can take to the American people that has no smoke and mirrors in it. Look, the consumer price index that is for the year 1996, that is what the check's already written on, it is already down from what's in the budget. It is already $13.1 billion too high, and that's reality versus our assumptions. Things like that we might have to fix, but they will be real. They will not be phony.
Senator Nichols, what is negotiable as far as you're concerned? $245 billion in tax cuts, does that have to stay?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think it should. I might mention, Senator Manchin mentioned the president speaks different at different times and sometimes on different days. He's been in favor of the child tax credit. That's the bulk. That's 77% of our package, and we direct that basically at the same group, at middle-income Americans. So I hope that's in there. And then the president has indicated maybe some support for cap gains. That's in our proposal. That will create jobs. So hopefully we can work out a package, but the president has to participate. They just can't stand back and throw stones and say, well, we're going to veto that, and the sky is falling, and have his press secretary just issue all kinds of slanderous things about all, you name it. We have to work together, and the president's the one that, addressed the State of the Union. He said, we're going to use Congressional Budget Office figures. And now they're saying, oh, no, that's not good enough. We want to use OMB figures, and that's how he gets most of his deficit reduction. But Senator Domenici mentioned CBO was wrong. Inflation's not as high. And so we're using next year's reality, the 2.5, and so we save some money. Senator Kerry wants to save more money in entitlements. This is the first budget we've ever had that ever really worked to cap the growth of entitlements. The president should be willing to do that. He knows we can't balance the budget unless we do it. So I hope the president will work with us, negotiate with us. I think we can come up with a responsible package to balance the budget. But I would say the year 2002 is not really negotiable. We could even do it sooner. If we throw in an accurate reflection of CPI, as many economists, most all economists said we should do, we could balance the budget before the year 2002.
Senator Kerry, should the president accept the Republican goal of balancing the budget in 2002? Is that realistic?
I think it is realistic. Now, again, it's not realistic if you got a tax cut in there, and the president's on record supporting a tax cut. I mean, there's no doubt that the budget deficit actually goes up next year and goes up the year after that. I mean, under the Republican plan, we have increased deficits for the first 2 years, and it's one of the reasons that people are skeptical about this plan. But I say again for emphasis that balancing the budget is just one of several important goals for this country. This plan takes us away from the goal of universal health insurance, which I think is a critical part of trying to provide a safety net for the American people in a very difficult, a very tough, a very competitive economy. Democrats want a market economy. We want real growth in that economy. We understand we have to have it. But we've got to have a different kind of a safety net, and this thing actually takes us away from that. We heard this week some remarkable confessions, one by the Majority Leader Dole, who said that he voted against Medicare in 65 because it wouldn't work. Well, it did work. 99% of people over 65 now have health insurance. Newt Gingrich said, now, we didn't end Medicare in this first phase, but we're going to allow it to wither on the vine. I mean, the fact
no, he didn't say that.
He did say that.
Well,
the truth of the matter is he did say that.
He said HICVA would.
No, well, no, he did not. He said that Medicare would, Pete, and you don't say that. That's not your position. I don't think it's Don Nichols' position.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
However,
not. We're going to have Medicare.
Well, the fact is that Bob Dole gave a speech this week where he said, I'm proud I voted against Medicare because it didn't work. Well, 43% of seniors were insured in 1965 and 99% are. The federal government played a very important role in making sure that Americans over the age of 65 had insurance. And the federal government ought to play a role in making sure that every single person in the workforce have insurance. And if you look at the cuts in Medicaid, they're worse than the cuts in Medicare. I mean, the problem is that we're moving under this budget away from that, what I think is a very important goal. And I'm willing to sign on, Don and Pete, I'm willing to sign on to changes in entitlement programs that will produce additional savings, particularly in the long term. But I want you to sign on to the goal of making sure that we do all we can to help all Americans make certain, whether you're working for the federal government or you're working in the private sector, that you're going to have health insurance.
But you
Well, we're not going to sign on to President Clinton's version of it that he sent us last year. Now, we're willing to talk about something realistic. But let me make a point. If the American people watching this can conclude much of anything, I'd be surprised, because everybody's talking about different things. But I think that I might say, I don't know how much time we've got, but for those who understand all this budget language, seriously, today is an indication that maybe it might be better for the Republicans in the United States Senate to start talking to the Democrats in the United States Senate.
Amen.
Maybe that'd be a better way to do it, not be talking to the President. Mr. President, that might be in the cards, too.
Well, Senator, let's try to bottom line all this, then. And you just seem to put something on the table, Senator Domenici. Senator Dodd, could you buy into reductions in the growth of Medicare in between what the president proposed?
Absolutely, we have.
And
He voted for it.
tax cuts in between what the Republicans proposed and Democrats? And also, last thing is welfare. Turning welfare back to the states. Could you buy into those things,
Well,
Senator Dodd?
first of all, we have. I mean, last year's budget, we cut into Medicare. The president proposed that. We didn't get a single Republican vote.
Then
doing
what's the
so.
problem? Why can't we
Well,
buy
because you just listened to it. You just heard the problem. Taxes are non-negotiable. The date is non-negotiable. The entitlement programs are basically, you've got to keep on to this notion somehow that this has to be done without dealing with health care. Look, Medicare costs, Medicaid costs don't go up in a vacuum. They go up because health care costs go up. And so don't blame Medicare and Medicaid. They're symptomatic of a larger problem. Senator Kerry's talked about it. And yet every effort to try and deal with the underlying reason why Medicare, why Medicaid go up, the answer is no, we're not going to deal with that. So don't talk about just cutting back on the cost or the benefits in this program without dealing with the underlying problem. There's no negotiation on that effort.
Well, Senator Dodd, a proposal put forward by Senator Domenici and a few weeks ago on this program by Senator Moynihan. And that is, you take the consumer price index minus 1%, and that becomes your cost of living increase. If you do that, you save over $600 billion over 10 years. Are you in favor of that, Senator Dodd?
Listen, I voted the other day, one of the 19 that Pete Domenici talked about.
But you would be in favor.
I'm certainly more than willing to consider lowering the CPI, whether it's a half a point or a full point. I want to make sure it's not a phony number designed just to produce some revenues to avoid the smoke and mirrors that I think is in there that Pete Domenici talked about. If that's the case, I'm more than willing to vote to that down.
What we should do, though, on the CPIs, we should use an accurate CPI. And if it comes out that saves a point or it saves a point and a half, you should use an accurate CPI. The facts are it's going to save hundreds of billions of dollars.
And Senator Domenici, you're for that?
Look, I want to make a point. Senator Dodd said that health care costs go up because health care costs go up. Frankly, health care costs go up in Medicare and Medicaid because we have structured programs that cause us to waste money. Both Medicaid and Medicare are over. You spend way more than you need to. You ought to reform them. Now, first of all, so we get some starting
No,
points.
but Senator Domenici, would you be willing to reduce the consumer price index by 1%, and that would be what COLA's, cost of living increases, would be? You'd be willing to buy into that?
And I think 1% is too much. Frankly, I don't think we're going to get authentication from enough economists that
But
is
you'd be
the right
willing to
number.
reduce it somewhat to bring in some savings?
I'm willing to. If the President of the United States or a large group of Democratic senators want to bring an alternate plan to the table that includes that, I'm willing to talk.
But Senator Kerry, here's the problem. When Moynihan and Dole proposed it, Senator Dole said, I'll do it if President Clinton joins in. But there's people over at the White House who accuse me of raising taxes and cutting benefits.
I think what Pete suggested just a few minutes ago is exactly right. I think what we ought to try to do is produce a bipartisan budget that includes some adjustments in the CPI, that redefines the objectives and makes it clear that we're not just going to try to move to a balanced budget, that we're going to control the cost of entitlements long term so that it doesn't continue to grow and erode our appropriations, so we're going to move as well towards universal insurance. I mean, we ought to set some other goals. But Pete, I'm willing to deal. I mean, I'm willing to participate not just in voting for CPI, but voting in other changes in entitlements. So in fact, we do solve the long-term problem, and the baby boomers begin to retire. So I think that the suggestion that Pete made earlier, rather than worrying about what the president's going to do, he's got to decide whether he's going to sign it. Don't negotiate with the president at the moment. Negotiate with congressional Democrats who have already demonstrated a willingness to vote for the very things that you say need to occur.
And cut the president out.
Don't cut the president out. He's not a legislator. He's the president. He has to decide whether to sign it. He's given, I think, relatively clear instructions as to what he's going to support. And negotiate with congressional Democrats right now who have demonstrated a willingness to vote for a balanced budget and who've indicated a willingness to go even further.
Senator Dodd, I'd like to talk to you about the welfare reform report, which Senator Kerry referred to earlier. If you had known of this report, which found that 1.1 million children would be thrown into poverty, and those in poverty would have their situation worsened as a result of the Senate welfare reform bill, would you have voted for that bill?
Well, first of all, the Senate improved substantially over the House bill. In fact, the child care provisions, the caps and so forth, the maintenance of effort issues, all were substantial improvements over the House bill. I'd like to see the report. I don't believe for a single second that people are trying to hide this or keep it under in the closet locked up someplace. This president has a remarkable record when it comes to children and families. He's also committed to trying to reform the welfare system of this country, which I think most Americans want to see. I believe we can do that. Obviously, we want to avoid doing anything that is going to jeopardize children. Right now, under the budget we just adopted in the Senate last night, 12 million people will be pushed off Medicaid, 4.5 million of them kids. So welfare reform is an issue, but that's a fact from the Urban
And
Institute.
I tell you that I think that welfare reform bill, given all sorts of other things that are going on, we've got a Federal Reserve chairman who considers that when wages go up, you've got something bad, and he's going to raise interest rates to stop wages from rising. You've got a world economy that's driving down wages as well, and our trade policies, which I generally support, are forcing wages down even further. And the most damning thing in this report indicates that people under $15,000 a year are going to lose $700, $800 in income.
So Senator Kerry, President Clinton should veto.
I think he should veto
the welfare bill.
I think he should veto the bill.
No,
Senator Dodd, the Secretary of Health and Human Services had a report showing 1 million kids thrown into poverty, and it was withheld by the White House. Shouldn't the president now come forward with his report and do an honest analysis, and then should he veto a bill that would do something like that?
First of all, we're not even through this process. The Republicans tried to incorporate welfare reform as part of this monstrosity, this reconciliation bill. We kept it out the other night, despite their efforts to include it. We're going to have a conference on welfare reform. We're in the midst of that right now. I think we ought to take a look at that report, see if we can't moderate that bill. Certainly, I'm not going to want to support a bill that's going to do that to children. That's why I offered the child care provisions and other such provisions.
But Tim,
Well, if a new report comes out that finds that a welfare reform bill will hurt hundreds of thousands of children, you will vote against it and urge the president to veto it?
If I see that report and it does, and that's where we end up, I think in conference we can correct that. I hope that's the case. Look at the report.
We have to take a quick break, Senator. I'm sorry. We're running a little bit over. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more discussion from Senators Domenici, Nichols, Dodd, and Kerry.
Meet the Press is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world.
One of the newest developments in nutrition is actually one of the oldest foods known to man, the soybean. For over 4,000 years, the Chinese have used it to make nutritious, protein-rich foods. But in America, the history of the soybean is considerably shorter. In fact, it didn't become a widely used food ingredient here until the 50s. One thing's for sure, though, it's come a long way since then. Over the years, one company has led the way in unlocking the versatility of the soybean. A company that each day continues to develop new ways to use this abundant, functional source of protein. The Archer Daniels Midland Company. That's using the old bean.
No one gives you more ways to add the impact of color to black and white documents. Xerox Color. A simpler way to do good work.
They are our mothers and daughters, sisters and wives. They are our friends and partners, our strength and conscience. They guide us, nurture us, and protect us. They give us hope, they give us life. But there's a fact of every woman's life that we must all face up to. 1 out of every 9 will be stricken with breast cancer. That's why GE created its Cinegráph technology. It can make mammography faster, more comfortable, and more accurate. And by helping doctors detect tumors earlier, the GE Cinegráph can help make a remarkable 91% cure rate possible, so that all our grandmothers and granddaughters, best friends and good neighbors, may live happier, healthier, and longer lives.
We're back on Meet the Press. Senator Kerry, the president's credibility has been called into question on this program and repeatedly over the last few weeks. I want to show you a tape and get your reaction to something.
Probably people in this room still mad at me at that budget because you think I raise your taxes too much. Well, it might surprise you to know that I think I raise them too much, too.
Now, you cast the deciding vote in favor of President Clinton's tax increase.
Well, I've calmed down a lot since that. Yeah, go ahead.
What did you think when you heard that?
Well, it's a big mistake. I mean, you should have told that audience you've made a lot of money since then. You've grown wealthier as a consequence of that piece of action, and you should have congratulated them for for finally agreeing that the economy has grown, the deficit's gone down, it's done some good. I mean, and the truth of the matter is, I wish the president had supported it. The president supported spending cuts in 93 and 94. Penny Kasich and later Kerry Brown, had he supported those instead of opposing him, I think the landscape, the political landscape, might look an awful lot different.
But the president's credibility, it's constantly being questioned. Fair?
It was unquestionably damaged with that statement with me. I mean, there's no question. Every president is going to have their credibility challenged, as a consequence of the things they say and things they do. I mean, the truth of the matter is there were an awful lot of us who took a great deal of risk on behalf of that Deficit Reduction Act. We didn't like a lot that was in there. We tried to change it afterwards, not just with Penny Kasich and Kerry Brown, but with the Entitlement Commission. And the president, when he says, I supported greater spending cuts, is wrong. He didn't. And had he supported those spending cuts in 93 and 94, as I said, I think the political landscape would have looked a lot different.
But you're encouraging the president today in saying, let the Democratic Congress negotiate. Are you not concerned that if you cut a deal with Republicans, President Clinton will saw your limb off?
Oh, that's a terrible metaphor, since somebody's already sawed one of them off. You know, what we have here is the reason I said that with Pete is that we are legislators. We're the ones that pass laws, and it seems to me that what we ought to try to do, I mean, Pete Domenech and I were both on the Entitlement Commission. We see the problems of entitlement. Alan Simpson and I have legislation in dealing with Social Security. I know it's tough in 95 to deal with that. What I'm saying is, let's Democrats and Republicans who want to balance the budget, who want to control the cost of entitlements, who want to get universal health insurance as well, let's us reach an agreement, then the president has to decide whether or not he's going to sign it.
Do you some days get so frustrated with Bill Clinton that you'd like to run against him?
No. I never get that frustrated.
You will not challenge him?
No, sir. I will
Under
not.
any circumstances?
Under any circumstances.
Should anyone?
No, I don't think so. That's not going to happen. No, I don't think
One of the unfortunate things about the president's remark when he, frankly, was telling the truth when he did raise taxes too much, and he admitted it, then there was such a backlash by some of the more liberal people in Congress and the people that did walk the plank for him and vote for higher taxes and at some political risk to them, was that to make them happy again, then he had to turn and be the very liberal president and start bashing anything that talked about spending cuts and any reductions and make the idea of compromise or working with Congress much, much more remote.
Senator Dodd, Congressman Dave Obey, well-respected Democrat, told his conference last week, listen, just accept the fact that President Clinton's going to sell us out. He's going to cut a deal with Newt Gingrich.
He did.
Well, listen, only in Washington could we get preoccupied for almost 3 weeks with a comment made at a fundraiser in Houston. I mean, what people want to know out there is what we're doing to them, not what we're doing to each other in this town. And frankly, what they're worried about is whether or not they're going to have their wages and salaries go up enough so they can start to afford to raise their families and educate their kids and take care of their parents. They want to know whether or not they're going to be able to walk safely in the streets. They want to know whether or not they're going to have anything. That's what they really worry about in this preoccupation, only in this town. Could we spend as much time as we have? The president has said that he shouldn't have said what he did. I know how he didn't want to raise taxes. No one does. That's nothing new in this town. And he felt bad about doing it. But let's not get hung up on a comment made at a fundraiser. To me, that's a waste of time.
Well, let's talk politics for a second, Senator Dodd. You're chairman of the Democratic Party. How formidable a candidate would Colin Powell be running as the Republican nominee?
Well, first of all, he's basically a Democrat. I mean, he's just trying to slip into this suit. I mean, he's trying to get into it. He's basically much as said that the reason he wouldn't run as a Democrat is he couldn't. As a sitting president there, and he's going around. Now, it's sad in a way to watch him go through these contortions to fit, in a way. I mean, he's pro-choice. He's for affirmative action. He believes that the Republican contract is too harsh. I'm using his words now, not mine. And obviously, that he's trying to be talked into running. So I think he's going to
sounds like you're afraid of him.
No, let me just say, I think he's going to have an awful time. He's not facing Bob Taft. This is 1952. He's talking about facing the firm of Gingrich, Graham, Dornan, and Buchanan. And let me tell you, they're going to go after him hammer and tong on these issues.
Senator Nichols, are you concerned by some of the positions Colin Powell has staked out? Would you be comfortable with Colin Powell as a Republican nominee?
I think he'd be a significant improvement over President Clinton, but I'm still not. I'm not even sure that he's a Republican. I don't know that he's ever admitted that he's a registered Republican. I know he contributed to prominent Democrat in the last few years, and so it is. Some of us question whether or not he's a Republican, and so I don't really think. I hope I hope he doesn't run, and two, if he tries to run as a Republican, I don't think he'll win the nomination.
Senator Domenici, you are hardly regarded as a moderate to conservative Republican. You've worked with Colin Powell over the last 12 years. Do you think that he has the qualities to be president?
Look, he has the qualities to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He has the qualifications to be an advisor to President Reagan on military matters. That doesn't necessarily qualify him to be president. I think there's a lot more that people have to know about Colin Powell, including the Republicans who have to vote in the primary before he's going to be the nominee of the Republican Party.
Do you think he's conservative enough, Senator?
Well, I think some of the things he has said, if you take those alone, make it rather difficult for him to fit within the Republican Party, at least mainstream Republicans as they exist today.
And you are a supporter of Senator Bob Dole, correct?
Absolutely, I am. I'm a total supporter of Senator Dole, and I believe he's going to be the next president of the United States.
Senator Domenici and Senator Nichols support Senator Dole. Senator Dodd obviously supports President Clinton. We hear a lot of reservations or concern about Colin Powell, Senator Kerry. Try to be objective for one moment here. Would Colin Powell...
You don't saw off my limbs.
I tell you, I did not even think of that, and I'm terribly sorry. I mean, you served our country.
No, please.
Do you think Colin Powell would be a strong and formidable candidate?
Oh, God, absolutely. I mean, and Colin, if you're listening, these Republicans appear not to want you. We'll want you in the Democratic Party. I mean, you'll be a tremendous... He's a fabulous leader. He's got tremendous character. He's done terrific when everybody was sitting with expectations, well, when he goes on television and starts answering questions, he's going to start to stumble. American people see a leader, and that's what they want. If Colin Powell decides to run, he is a formidable...
And Bill Clinton would have a very tough race against him.
Well, according to polling data, he's the only person that beats Bill Clinton right now.
And you think he should run?
Well, I'm not going to advise him to run or not to run. I'm just saying if he gets in the race, he's tough. He's going to be tough in the Republican primary, and he's tough in the general election.
Senator Kerry, we have to leave it there. Senator Domenici out in New Mexico, Senator Dodd, Senator Nichols,
very much.
thank you all. And let's see if we can arrange
See you next week, Pete.
a bipartisan
Have a good one.
consensus, and we'll have you all back. Coming next, one of the legends, Irving R. Levine.
No matter how you try to spoon it out, or squeeze it out, or pour it out, you can never get the fat out of sausage. But now there's breakfast links from Green Giant. They're all vegetable with no cholesterol and 81% less fat than pork sausage. And the taste? They're everything you'd expect from the Giant. Breakfast links and breakfast patties from Green Giant.
Ho, ho, ho.
When you want the flavor, not all the fat.
I will build a motor car for the great multitude, constructed of the best materials by the best men and women to be hired. Any person making a good salary will be able to own one and enjoy with his family the blessings of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces.
Todd and Celia Unger began their voyage together nearly 40 years ago. Today, they embark on retirement as carefree as when they first set out. That's because for the past 20-some years, they've worked with a broker from Dean Witter.
Respect the power of a client's dream and health each year.
At Dean Witter,
We measure success one investor at a time.
Every second of every day, there are 3 new mouths in this world to feed. Hundreds of millions more by the year 2000. And the majority of them will be born in countries where malnutrition is already reaching alarming proportions. Right now, the world has the food and the resources to conquer hunger. But it won't happen as long as we continue to look the other way. ADM, supermarket to the world.
More of Meet the Press after this brief news and weather update.
Good morning. In the news today, Atlanta has its first major sports title ever as the Braves won a tight 6th game to become the World Series champs. A homer by David Justice was the only run in last night's match with Cleveland. The victory, as you might have expected, sparked a hometown celebration. And in other news today, 11th hour rallies take place in Quebec, where voters go to the polls tomorrow to voice their opinion on secession. Demonstrations on both sides of the issue have been taking place in Montreal and elsewhere. The latest poll says the vote is too close to call. Another new poll shows that retired General Colin Powell would likely jump to the head of the pack if he decided to seek the Republican nomination for president. And the New York Times CBS poll says that right now Powell would beat President Clinton in an election. A Democrat from Massachusetts is deciding to call it quits after nearly a quarter of a century in Congress. Gary Stubbs told constituents yesterday it's time to move on to other challenges. And funeral services take place tomorrow near Fort Bragg for Major Stephen Badger, a victim of Friday's sniper attack. Soldiers describe the alleged shooter as a quiet loner. The Washington Post reports that he had a history of psychiatric problems. And a joint military exercise with the Russians in Missouri. The U.S. exploded a missile silo, and the Russian defense minister was invited to set off the blast. This Cold War-era silo once held a missile with a nuclear warhead pointed at Russia, a sign of the times. And a subway fire in the former Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan has killed at least 289 people and injured 140 others. News reports blame it on an electrical malfunction, but both local police and the Deputy Prime Minister's office are investigating. The Islamic Jihad, reeling from the assassination of its leader in Malta, has named a new chief. The group gave few details, but blamed Israel for that shooting and promised revenge against Jews everywhere. That's the news this Sunday morning. Now back to Tim Russert in Washington.
Irving R. after the station break.
The ghouls are gathering at the Today Show window for the Halloween contest. Put on your favorite costume and join us for fun and prizes. Trick or Treat Tuesday on Today.
This is a raid. What are they after? Phony documents and illegal business that's costing taxpayers. Watch Giselle Fernandez on the Sunday edition of NBC Nightly News tonight.
Outdoor fountains and pools are really getting popular, as well as the whole concept of water gardening. You can buy all kinds of water plants for them. I think people like fountains because they're relaxing. The sound is soothing, almost therapeutic, and they're really easy to install. Or here's a little wall mount fountain that you can put either outside or inside your home. Of course, this time of year we do start moving indoors, and these Serenity fountains are a fun new way to enjoy indoor gardening. They create a nice atmosphere. It even has some environmental benefits by adding some humidity to the air. They sell for about $120 and can go in the living room, kitchen, or even your desk at work. Now is a good time also to give your indoor plants a good cleaning. I just put them in the shower and wipe off the leaves. And don't be surprised if your plants drop a few leaves this time of year. You know, indoor gardening is a great stress reliever, too. I'm Mike Freeman. See you next time on the Northwest Gardener.
At the Men's Warehouse, when you show your customer a look like this, you'll show them how to dress casually and still mean business. I guarantee it.
News Channel 8 can also be seen on these local translators.
Welcome back to Meet the Press. With us now, the one and only Irving R. Levine. Welcome.
Thank you, Tim. I must say the bow tie is extremely becoming to you.
And what about my friend Ms. Myers? I mean,
particularly so.
In your honor.
But unlike you, Irving, we don't tie our own.
Irving, the questions people ask me most about you, other than your journalism, one, have you always worn a bow tie every piece you've ever done on television?
Yes, I have. And, you know, on one occasion, a correspondent on NBC, Ken Bodie, wore a bow tie on a spot. He received a phone call immediately afterwards from the then president of NBC News, who said, look, one correspondent on our news department with a bow tie is quite enough.
And the R stands for?
It's my mother's maiden name, family name, Raskin.
This is your 106th appearance on Meet the Press. We went back in our archives and found 1971, you were questioning then Treasury Secretary John Connally. Let's take a look.
Mr. Secretary, I'd like to follow up on Mr. Lissagor's question concerning your own political ambitions. There was talk at the time of your nomination that you might be interested in a vice presidential or even presidential nomination yourself next time around. Is there any truth to that?
Mr. Levine, I think that's where the basis of the misunderstanding always occurs. People attributing to me political ambitions which I do not have. I recognize full well that if I had political ambitions, I probably would not have agreed to become Secretary of the Treasury as a Democrat in a Republican administration. It tends to infuriate the Republicans and anger the Democrats, and you lose on both sides. And from a political standpoint, I don't think it's very wise. I don't have any political ambitions.
And a few years later, Irving R. Levine, Mr. Connolly ran for president, spent $13 million, got one delegate. Is that the first and only time you've ever been misled by a politician?
I wish I could say that were the case. I must say I was very interested in the previous discussion to hear the talk about changing the consumer price index. I think that's one of the things that makes Americans cynical. For years, in all the 25 years that I've been covering economics in Washington, we've been told that U.S. statistics are the best and most accurate in the world, and yet when it comes to finding a device for reaching political goals, they start toying with the consumer price index, the inflation rate, politically, and I think that's the kind of thing that makes Americans cynical.
Do you think Americans have gotten more and more cynical about their government?
Oh, I think so.
Why?
Well, we've had a great variety of things. The standard answer to that, Watergate, Vietnam, and the kind of statements that President Clinton made about his regrets about raising taxes.
Of all the people you've encountered in journalism, the world leaders, the national leaders, who is the most interesting or compelling?
Well, I think the ones which have been the most interesting are those which have been the far-sighted ones, the ones who have been the pioneers. In Russia, when I was there, Nikita Khrushchev set the stage for the fall of communism, for the move toward free enterprise. I covered Christian Barnard in heart transplants, the pioneer in transplants. William Simon, as Secretary of the Treasury, really was the forerunner of the Newt Gingrich contract with America, 10 points. Pope Paul VI, I traveled with him on his plane all over the world, to Jerusalem, to Bombay, to the United Nations. He set the stage for what we see happening in the Catholic Church today with its greater world reach.
Lisa?
After 45 years, what is your sense of the news business as you leave?
Well, I think it's popular now for those of us in the news business and those outside to criticize what's going on. I, for one, think that the news business is better today than it was when I started 45 years ago with NBC News. I think the writing is better. I think the production is better. I think those who cover their beats are more skilled, and certainly the technology is mind-boggling.
And three of those people who are specialists in this area, Pat Vasquez, our editor, Terry Schaefer, producer, and Brian Gumbel, put together this little tape that we'd like to play it for our audience right now.
Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington. Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Tokyo.
Irving began as a foreign correspondent, a stringer for NBC News. He covered the war in Korea and then became a radio reporter in New York before moving on to serve as a staff correspondent. First in Moscow, where he was the first accredited correspondent and made the best out of the darkest days of the Cold War.
This is where I sleep. I only use one pillow. Every night I remove one, but every morning the maid insists on putting it back. Actually, the service here is quite good. I ring once for the waiter, twice for the maid, 3 times for the valet.
After Moscow, he was sent to Rome, where he spent 12 blessed bilingual years.
Mr. Togliatti, I will ask you questions in English. If you prefer to answer in Italian, please do so, and then I will translate as you speak.
Wherever he went, Irving's look and his style were distinctive.
Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Rome.
Back in the United States, he became television's first economic correspondent, and over the course of 25 years covered domestic budget battles at home and economic summits all around the world.
Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Munich.
Guadalupe. Venice.
Producers who worked with Irving came to know exactly what pictures they would need to edit his pieces.
Auto workers. Unemployment lines. Money. Christmas shopping.
Irving became a Washington institution, a class act who could laugh at his world and himself.
Excuse me, old buddy, could you step over here? There we go. What's going on? Television. I see you on news at 4 o'clock, at newsstand.
But if you can move for a moment, then I'll be able to get on tonight.
His wife Nancy stood by him throughout, and his son Danny once even helped him out of a jam at work.
This is Daniel R. Levine, substituting for Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington.
Irving was very adaptable, adjusting easily to new technology, and also to almost any assignment.
So, it's not surprising. Well, really? Only vestiges of which remain. But of course, Grey Poupons.
In time, Irving's fame transcended news.
Number 2, during sex, your wife calls out the name of Irving R. Levine.
Is that picture that you were just showing a moment ago?
Irving, thanks for coming.
I'm not finished.
It's late. These people have to work tomorrow.
I was just getting to my George Bush material.
Sit down, Irving.
Who died and made you Leslie Stahl?
If I think about my years at NBC, what I'll miss most, I guess the back rubs from Irving R. Levine.
Irving R. Levine, how did you get so camp? What happens now to Irving R. Levine after 45 years at NBC?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to be offered a position which I've accepted as Dean of International Studies at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm looking forward to that, a chance to pass on whatever little knowledge and experience I've acquired during these years to some students and perhaps set them on the road to a career.
Well, that's terrific, and you have set all of us on our careers. I want to thank you publicly with all our Meet the Press audience, not only for your professionalism as a journalist, but your graciousness and your civility. And Irving, you are always a gentleman and a pleasure to be with, and we are honored to have you with us for these last 45 years. God bless you.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure, a privilege, and a real honor to be a member of the NBC News team, and most particularly to serve under a great bureau chief, Timothy Russer.
Just push 3 buttons like your valet, and I'll be there, Irving. And Nation of Islam bodyguard, is that next for Irving?
I'm afraid that's giving the bow tie a bad name.
With that, Irving R. Levine, we thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll be right back. And we said goodbye to one of the legends, Irving R. Levine.
Meet the Press is sponsored by ITT. For 75 years, the one to follow.
Gentlemen, I smell business opportunity somewhere.
Where?
By the time these guys notice how much opportunity the sports and entertainment industry holds,
This way? I don't know.
the most exciting opportunity of all
That way?
maybe will be gone.
This way?
That way.
Because Madison Square Garden is already part of ITT. For 75 years, ITT, the one to follow.
The final curtain comes down on the fallen empire of Charles Forsyth King. From a small investment firm, he built a dynasty that ruled Wall Street. Times were good, but times change.
King's mistake was in preferring paper money to paper itself. He should have invested in timber.
What he thought was a bull market began to bear down on him.
I kept telling him, Charlie, you hit a brick wall. Buy bricks. He worked us day and night. All that electricity. Too bad we didn't have our money in coal.
Where once stood a mighty Xanadu was now a ravaged financial ruin.
Well, it tells me that he failed, but not why.
Hey, what were his last words?
They say it was one word. The one thing he wished he had.
This GE compact fluorescent bulb gives you soft, warm light.
Take the ball, Jamie.
It's an energy-efficient bulb that lasts year after year.
Hit the ball, Jamie.
Up to 9,000 hours longer than an ordinary bulb.
Outside with the ball, Jamie.
So it won't need to be changed for about 7 years.
Hey, Jamie, how many grown-ups does it take to change a light bulb? Change a light bulb? Why would anybody need to change a light bulb?
The revolutionary GE compact fluorescent bulb.
In 1959, when Irving R. Levine was a cub reporter, Fidel Castro came to New York City. It doesn't appear he changed much or changed anyone's minds about the future of Cuba.
Dr. Castro, what good has your visit done so far?
Well, spiritual profit, because I didn't came here for material profit. Nevertheless, if we are not well understood here in the United States, we would get damages, material damages.
Do you think you now better understand the United States from your few days here?
I believe that here in the United States, the people and everybody and the government are going to understand us better. It is good not only for Cuba, it is good too for the United States.
Understand him or not, the economic embargo against Cuba continues and will probably remain so until Fidel Castro is gone. And we'll be right back.
This is a document in the digital office where you capture ideas and share them effortlessly. Whether they're on paper or on your screen, this is the space where Xerox works, giving you a simpler way to do good work.
Wouldn't it be great to save on all your calls wherever you may be?
Life is so complicated. I just want to have one plan that covers everything, and that's it.
Introducing AT&T True Reach Savings, the first plan that lets you save on every type of U.S. call you make.
That would be great because it would cover my long-distance calls from home, his cellular calls. We can still use our calling cards, so that would be perfect.
Save 25% off your AT&T phone bill guaranteed when you spend just $25 a month. And the best part is we're saving money. It's simple, it's guaranteed. That's your true choice, AT&T.
Relax, kick back, rest easy. Not the first thoughts that come to mind when investing on your own. Working with a Dean Witter broker, you'll feel differently. Every client's ambition should be our ambition. Their dreams, our dreams. Because after all, it's reassuring to know someone is there looking out for your interests. Dean Witter, we measure success, one investor at a time.
To experience the true joy of cooking, it must be pursued with reckless abandon and total disregard for the inevitable splatters, spills, squirts, and the occasional splash. Fortunately, GE's profile cooking appliances have ingenious quick clean features like lift-top ranges, self-cleaning ovens, easy wipe surfaces, and sealed burners. So they clean with just a wipe. GE's profile appliances are so easy to clean, they take the joy of cooking to new heights.
We'd like to welcome a new affiliate to the NBC family, WNWO-TV Channel 24 in Toledo, Ohio. Join Giselle Fernandez tonight for the NBC Nightly News. State your day tomorrow with the Today program and then the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. That's all for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
The world is now watching Meet the Press with Tim Russert. NBC News, now more than ever.
Dateline Tuesday. Kristen was stalked, chased, and savagely beaten by an obsessed ex-boyfriend, and no one helped.
The system failed.
Why? Dateline NBC Tuesday.
Today at 12:30 Eastern, the Bills, the Dolphins, the AFC's top defense awaits Dan Marino's expected return or regional action. The NFL on NBC today.
On the next Live, Carol Channing. Plus, Rosie O'Donnell and England's hottest pop group, Take That, on Live.
Monday at 9 on News Channel 8.
If you love beautiful spring flowering bulbs, now's the time to plant them for next spring. And the bulbs are in at your Fred Meyer Garden Centers. Just look at the selection. Tulips, hyacinths, daffodils, crocus, and there's dozens of varieties. And Freddy's has these bulk bins so you can hand select the bulbs you like. And these jumbo packs will save you lots of money. So come in now while selection's best. And there's flowering mums and winter pansies for autumn color. The joy of gardening. You'll find it at Fred Meyer.
I'm going to every corner and county of Oregon, talking to